Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. Today we're talking about a book on books, as the author puts it. Vermontiana is by Kevin Graffagnino and published by UVM Center for Research on Vermont. In short, this is a collection of singular, rare, and irreplaceable primary sources on Vermont history. We're talking about books, maps, pamphlets, prints, dating from 1764 to 1899. And this subject and the book is a labor of love from its author, our guest today, J. Kevin Graffagnino. Welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Nice to be back.
And we're happy to have you back. And Vermontiana, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
All right, where did that name come from?
Well, we can track it back to the 1890s. It's a Vermont variation on Americana, which was common for centuries before. Vermontiana is anything on paper about Vermont's history, books, pamphlets. I don't know why there's an I in the middle. Nobody knows, but that's the way we've always done it and the way we've always said it. It became very common by the early 20th century.
So definitely complicated to say, but it's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
And it's almost the size of something that belongs on a coffee table. So is this something that you think maybe should be a coffee table read, a good gift for that, or is it something you should read word for word?
I would guess most people will dip into it. The chapters are short. You can read one in a few minutes. You can skip around. It's not a narrative history, but each of them has additional readings. It gives information background on why is this item interesting, what does it tell us about Vermont history, and a lot of them are tip of the iceberg. There will be a pamphlet on the anti-slavery movement. Well, there are hundreds of pamphlets on the anti-slavery movement. There's a pamphlet on the temperance movement. So they're sort of diving into bigger subjects of Vermont history. And
sure.
So I hope, my goal, of course, is to turn every Vermonter into a mad dog collector of Vermont history. But I hope it'll be of interest more broadly than just to the collecting community.
Sure, but it gives you a glimpse of kind of an array of things.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the preface, you actually say that a friend told you he wanted to start collecting Vermontiana, and kind of asked your advice on what to look for. How long have you been interested in this kind of thing?
Oh, more than half a century. I started a small book business when I was 17 years old as a way of paying my way through UVM, and I specialized in Vermont books and pamphlets. And I was 17, I'm now about to turn 70, so it's been 50 years. In the preface, I say, this book took five months to write, 50 years to research.
Sure, so it sounds like a labor of love for you.
Oh, absolutely. It's a passion of mine, and I got to the point where I realized if anyone was going to write a guide to collecting Vermont stuff, it had to be me. The people I learned from are long dead. And I looked around and thought, lots of things I could write about for a next book, but this is one that might actually outlive me. And 200 years from now, if there's a Vermont, there will be collectors. And they'll say, how many of those Graffagnino things you got? Because collectors love lists. They love to collect. There are 100 great things to collect. I have 87. How many do you have, et cetera?
All right, absolutely. So definitely a calling as well as
It's not a job. It's not a profession. It's a calling. Yes.
All right, and one of the sources that you used a lot is UVM Silver Special Collections Library, and we actually got a glimpse inside, and we'll kind of talk about some of the artifacts there in just a minute. But what other resources did you use for?
Well, the Vermont Historical Society ranks with UVM among the great collections of Vermont history. Shelburne Museum, Bennington Museum, Sheldon Museum in Middlebury. There are more than 200 local historical societies in Vermont, most of which have collections, and many of our public libraries also have Vermont rooms or Vermont collections. Nobody watching this show is more than 20 miles away from a place they could go to study Vermont and look at cool stuff.
Yeah, so if you see something in here and you feel inspired, you know, you can find something right in your neighborhood.
Yeah, it's close, and Vermont is so small. You can't be more than 3 hours away
sure,
from
very
any
handy.
part of the state. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so Vermontiana is organized chronologically, and it's annotated. It's a list of 154 rare and noteworthy and important 18th and 19th century books, pamphlets, broadsides, maps, and prints, so quite a variety. And while some items, Graffagnino writes, could be acquired by diligent collectors or those with considerable resources, a lot of them are unattainable, meaning there are only a couple of copies existing. And that's actually where we're going to start with number 9 on the list, Bernard Roman's A Chorographical Map of the Northern Department of North America, published in 1778. Did I get that right?
Yes.
All right, and so what makes this map so distinctive?
It's distinctive because it's the first time the word Vermont appears on a map.
Wow.
If you're an outsider and you're wondering what's going on up there in that contentious area between the Connecticut and the Hudson, this map tells you Vermont exists, Vermont is legitimate, and Vermont is here to stay. Now, it's tough for us in the 21st century because in this map, north is oriented over to the lower left. We want to stand the map up so that north points up like it's supposed to. But it's a wonderful statement of Vermont's legitimacy at a time when the state is only a year or two old and has enemies all around. I used to lecture on Vermont history, and I could put this map up and do an hour on why this map is so cool and so interesting and what it tells us about what's going on here in our embattled little state.
Sure, yeah. First mark on a map too is quite an achievement for a state.
So it's one of those foundation items. If you collect Vermont history, you want a Romans map somewhere on your wall. Yeah, they're expensive. They're not so rare you can't get one, but it's going to cost you. It's the cost of a new car.
And kind of to that point, the items that precede it are the only surviving copies of stuff like rare books or court proceedings or speeches. But this one was pretty high up on the list. How painstaking was it to kind of put all these together?
You know, I started out thinking I'd do 100 items, and I zoomed past that in the first few weeks. And then I said, well, I'll do 150, because if you're doing a book, you've got to stop at some point, or you have a 10-volume set. And I got to 150, and there were just 3 or 4 more I had to put in, and I finally called it quits at 154. I could have kept going. It wouldn't have been hard for me to find another 40 or 50 really interesting items, but I hope the book will be a starter for somebody who's interested, and collectors can argue over what did he leave out. I wouldn't have put that one in. That's the nature of the collecting world.
All right, now let's jump ahead to number 26 on the list, The Contrast, A Comedy in 5 Acts, which is written by Royal Tyler. Of course, that's who the UVM Theater is named after. Why'd you choose this one?
Because it's a Vermont story by a Vermont author. The plot involves 2 Vermonters going to the city and battling for the affections of 2 women against 2 urban fops. And of course, the Vermonters win, as they should. But Royal Tyler was a justice on the Vermont Supreme Court. He's one of Vermont's earliest, best-known writers. But this one is cool because on the title page it's signed by George Washington. It was George Washington's personal copy of this book. So it is a real treasure. The book is wonderful, but this copy is much more special.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, that name alone, I'm sure, gives it some extra credence.
And it's at UVM where it belongs, and so you can't own one, but you could own a copy of The Contrast. It's a few $1,000s, but the Washington signature makes this copy immensely special.
Absolutely. And now let's move on to a more obtainable item. And this is 127, a little bit further down the list. And this one, as a Northeast Kingdom native, we already talked about this a little bit before the show, but this one's kind of closer to my heart. Tell me about the lithograph of the Memphremagog House.
Well, the Memphremagog House is one of the great tourist hotels in Vermont's Gilded Age, the decades after the Civil War. The railroads make it possible for middle-class and upper-middle-class tourists to come and stay in Vermont, and the Memphremagog House is Newport's entry in great places for out-of-staters to come, and it exists for decades, burns down early 20th century, but it has its counterparts all over the state of Vermont. The Equinox in Manchester, the Clarendon House in Clarendon Springs, and it's the start of the Vermont tourist industry. So this is a lovely print in its own right, but it also is that wide-angle lens on the start of the tourism industry, which is now so dominant in the Vermont economy.
Sure, yeah, so kind of a change of the economic tides.
Exactly, from purely agriculture and lumber and other trades to how many people can we bring to this state so that they will boost the economy. And the Memphis-Magog House is a great example of that.
Yeah, and you mentioned it burned down. What's there now? Do you know?
I don't. You know, I went
sorry,
online
pop
and
quiz.
looked at this last night. I'm sure your viewers from Newport know. It was on the north side of Main Street, right next to the lake, but I couldn't for the life of me find a map of Newport that told me what's there now. It's right in the downtown district. For all I know, it's another. I haven't been in Newport in quite a while.
Sure,
So
yeah, you have to make the trip up there.
This is a mystery.
And you mentioned that a couple of them haven't burned down, so what ones are still standing to your
Well,
knowledge?
the Equinox is one of the most famous down in Manchester. The Clarendon Springs House in Clarendon is still standing. And that's about as far as I could go for a list of the large ancient. They're almost all made out of wood, and they almost all had boiler fires or furnace fires that burned them down in the early 20th century.
And so we saw a print of one of these, and it seems like those are somewhat common. So were these tchotchkes? Did people bring them home?
I think they were advertisements. I think that the hotel wanted to advertise that it was wonderful, that it was lovely. You emphasized that it was close to a railroad for ease of access. You put well-dressed, fashionable people in the foreground to show that your clientele were people that other people would want to mingle with. So I think more advertisements of Newport and the hotel.
All right, and not to put you on the spot, make you maybe choose a favorite of what sounds like your children almost, but
Yes.
Is there anything out there in the book that we haven't mentioned yet that really stands out to you as a favorite?
Not as a favorite. The Romans map would rank high for me as a first, but yeah, they are like my children. They're like old friends. When I started the list, I'd written about many of them in the past, and it was reacquainting myself with old friends. So yeah, it just, for a guy like me, having these in front of me, holding them in my hands, it's an emotional and spiritual experience as well as intellectual.
Absolutely.
The original matters to me.
Yeah, and so when you get this book, you're getting a lot.
I hope so. If it's something you're interested in, and it takes a while. My goal is all Vermonters should be collectors, even young people like you.
All right, well, I guess we can start here. Vermontiana would make a great gift for any Vermonter or student of history. It's available wherever you get your books, and of course we encourage viewers to stop at their local library and check it out, or if you're not going to do that, at least shop local. And I want to thank the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX who make our programs possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.